In the quiet woods of Oakenwood, a band of fearless squirrels found themselves in a dire standoff with a relentless pack of coyotes. With tails held high and determination in their eyes, they were prepared to defend their territory at any cost. But just as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened, leaving both the squirrels and the coyotes frozen in shock. Everything inside Park Ranger, Killian told him that these poor squirrels had no chance against these three bloodthirsty coyotes. Maybe a couple of them would make it out of this situation alive, but most of them would probably be used for dinner. But then, something happened that would seemingly change everything. Killian had been following the strange standoff between the animals for a while now, and had even gotten involved in it to some capacity. But even he had not seen this coming, not even a little bit. So what happened that shocked both the animals and Killian? Would the squirrels escape? And what was Killian's role in all this? Killian had been following the pack of coyotes for a while now. He is a park ranger and was alerted to the presence of these animals by a couple of people hiking in the woods. At first, he was confused as to having trouble believing these people, as there had not been any coyote sightings in the area for years now. But he was seeing them with his own eyes now. Killian was very unsure of what he was supposed to do in response. A group of coyotes in this area could spell trouble for some of the smaller critters in the forest, the animals he was supposed to protect. But he also firmly had the opinion that he needed to let nature walk its course. Let what is set to happen. But Killian's resolve about this would be tested very shortly. The coyotes had been very calm so far, walking through the forest at a leisurely pace. But suddenly, the nose of the pack leader went up in the sky and then down to the ground. Its ears went up, and it was clear that the animal had gotten a scent of something. The coyotes now started to increase their pace, and Killian found that he had a lot of trouble keeping up with them. They were not a clear path or something. These animals were able to move through the thick of the forest at high speeds. And it didn't take long before the animals had managed to shake Killian. He was getting nervous now. The animals were clearly moving toward a potential prey, and Killian had no idea where they were. And on top of that, he was not even sure if he would want to interfere if that situation occurred. But he at least wanted to have the option. And then suddenly, he heard some commotion in the distance. Now Killian had a target, and he started to rush in the direction of the sound. He knew this had to be the coyotes' doing. The forest was otherwise nearly almost as calm as could be. All Killian could hope for was there was not too late, or that the coyotes had found themselves a prey that was able to outsmart them. But this was not the case. After about a minute of making his way through the vegetation as quickly as possible, Killian finally stumbled on the animal again, and they were in what he could only describe as a standoff. The three coyotes were surrounding a huddled-together small group of squirrels. There had to be at least 5 or 6 of them. Every time one of the squirrels made a move, one of the coyotes reacted to it, forcing the tiny animal back into the huddle. Slowly but surely, the coyotes were inching closer to the prey. It was clear that they wanted to do this right, and not end up with only one squirrel to share after their hunt. Killian had never felt so torn. The squirrels were probably his favorite animal around here, and having to watch multiple of them be devoured by coyotes was one of the most horrifying sights he could imagine. But was he then supposed to jump in here to stop them? These coyotes also needed to eat. There was no evil intention whatsoever. But Killian could not just stand by and watch. He took a deep breath, and before the coyotes could strike, he jumped out of the bushes, screaming and waving his hands. It distracted the coyotes for only a second, which was enough for the squirrels to make a run for it. But this situation was anything from over, as the hunters immediately set in the chase again, leaving Killian behind. He started running for his life in an attempt to catch up with the animals, but they were not making it easy for him. He did not even see the squirrels anymore, only the coyotes. And Killian's heart dropped when they suddenly turned around and started running directly at him. Now, things were going to get very tense for him. Had the coyotes lost the squirrels, and were they now coming back at him to take revenge? He was a strong young man, but he did not know if he could hold his own against three beasts like this. But a split second later, he realized what was really going on. The squirrels were also coming in his direction, and before they could react, they suddenly all jumped on him and started hiding in his pockets. Killian felt a shiver run down his spine. His initial fear of the coyotes' revenge was now replaced by a mix of astonishment and anxiety. The weight of the squirrels in his pockets felt oddly reassuring. But the coyotes had taken notice. Their growls grew louder, eyes fixed on the small creatures now hiding with Killian. Taking a deep breath, he stood tall, positioning himself protectively, ready to shield the terrified squirrels. He knew he couldn't just stand there. Every moment he hesitated gave the coyotes an advantage. Killian quickly scanned the environment around him. Tall trees with thick trunks on his left, a rocky incline on his right. Memories of his ranger training flowed back. He recalled the terrain maps, the hidden paths, and the natural barriers. This forest was his domain, and he needed to use that knowledge now. Without warning, Killian picked up a handful of loose pebbles and threw them towards a thicket on his right. The sudden movement and noise startled the coyotes, diverting their attention for a crucial moment. Simultaneously, he began stomping on the ground, creating a false trail, leading away from his intended path. He needed to confuse them, mislead them, anything to buy himself and the squirrels some time. The ruse seemed to work. The coyotes momentarily halted, ears perked, trying to discern the source of the noise. This brief pause was all Killian needed. Using the tall trees as cover, he made a break for it, sprinting as silently as he could manage. The element of surprise was on his side, but he knew it wouldn't last long. He needed to find a safer location, fast. Branches whipped past him as Killian dashed through the underbrush. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the exertion, but from the adrenaline of the chase. Every so often, he'd change direction, hoping to further disorient the coyotes. The squirrels in his pockets, sensing the urgency, remained still. With every step, Killian hoped to put more distance between them and the looming threat. The forest ahead began to open up, presenting new paths and possibilities. After what felt like hours, Killian finally slowed down, breathing heavily. He remembered the spot where the squirrels first sought refuge with him. Feeling a pull, he decided to return there, hoping for a hint of what to do next. With every step, he moved with the utmost caution, ensuring that no twigs snapped underfoot. The place seemed so calm now, a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted earlier. As Killian paused to collect his thoughts, a distant howl pierced the stillness. It was echoed by another, then another. His heart sank. The coyotes were still in pursuit, their determination unyielding. The squirrels in his pockets stirred uneasily, their tiny hearts racing. Killian knew he needed to move. While they had gained some distance, the threat was far from over. Killian's ranger training had introduced him to many secrets of the forest, paths unknown to many. Now was the time to use this knowledge. Deliberately, he chose the lesser-traveled trails, winding through thickets and crossing brooks. The paths were rough and meandering, perfect to confuse any pursuers. Every now and then, he'd double back or switch direction, leaving a maze of footprints behind. The forest was alive with sounds, and each one kept Killian on edge. The rustling of leaves, the snap of a twig, or the distant call of a nightbird, every noise seemed magnified. Every so often, he'd think he caught the faintest echo of a growl, or the soft pad of a paw on the forest floor. Paranoia gripped him, making it hard to discern real threats from mere phantoms of his imagination. Feeling the squirrels move in his pockets, Killian sensed they were trying to communicate. Every twitch or squeak seemed to hint at a direction, an intuition he began to trust. These forest dwellers, with their acute senses, became his compass. Led by their subtle cues, Killian felt himself veering away from danger, moving towards patches of the forest that felt safer, quieter. The bond between man and nature deepened as they navigated the threats together. As the shroud of night deepened, Killian's steps became less certain. Suddenly, an unmistakable silhouette appeared amidst the trees, a cabin, old and weather-beaten, standing as a relic from another time. Moss-covered shingles and creaking timber spoke of decades of abandonment. It was a welcome sight. Perhaps, he pondered, this was a former ranger's post or a woodsman's retreat. The door to the cabin creaked open with a push. Inside, remnants of the past lay scattered, an old table, a broken chair, a fireplace long cold. Without wasting a moment, Killian fortified the entrance, using whatever he could find. Old boards were propped against the door, and a makeshift barricade took shape. Ensuring the squirrels were safe and snug in a corner, he settled down, preparing for the long night. Within the confines of the cabin, every sound seemed to amplify. A distant owl's hoot, the wind rustling through gaps in the structure, the soft murmur of nocturnal insects. Each noise was a reminder of the dangers lurking outside. Killian's ears strained, ever vigilant, distinguishing between the innocent songs of the night and the possible threat of approaching predators. In the dim light, Killian turned his attention to the squirrels, their tiny eyes glistening with curiosity. He began to whisper tales of his ranger adventures, and in turn, he imagined their chirrups and squeaks were stories of their own, tales of forest life, of close calls, and of kinship. This exchange, though wordless on their part, created an intimate bond, transcending the barriers of species. Despite the relative safety of the cabin, a deep-seated unease lingered. Every creak of the cabin's timber, every gust of wind seemed fraught with foreboding. Killian tossed and turned, his mind racing with the events of the day and thoughts of the journey ahead. Sleep came in short, fitful bursts, always overshadowed by the need to remain alert and ready. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the gaps in the cabin, Killian roused from his uneasy sleep. Rubbing his eyes, he looked around, taking in the fragile sanctuary that had shielded him through the night. The squirrels stirred in the corner, their tiny forms a reminder of the responsibilities on his shoulders. Surveying the terrain outside, he knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. Stepping out, Killian was greeted by the aftermath of a storm. Freshly fallen trees lay strewn across his intended path, their giant roots upturned, creating intricate barriers. The skies darkened again, releasing a heavy downpour that turned the forest floor into a muddy, slippery terrain. Every route seemed blocked. Every step threatened to halt progress. Nature, it seemed, had placed another formidable obstacle in their path. Mud clung to Killian's boots, weighing him down. The once familiar forest now looked like a maze, transformed by nature's wrath. Streams had swollen, their waters rushing with newfound fury. Crossing them demanded caution and strategy. His ranger training kicked in, guiding him on when and where to tread, but each decision was accompanied by a nagging uncertainty. It wasn't long before Killian stumbled upon a deer fawn, its leg trapped under a heavy branch. Without hesitation, he freed the creature, who bleated gratefully before joining his group. As they progressed, they encountered more animals, a rabbit caught in brambles, a bird with a damaged wing. Each rescue added to his growing entourage, forming a makeshift family united by circumstance and need. With every additional companion, the journey became more demanding. They needed to find safer, wider paths to accommodate everyone. Hunger gnawed at them, and fatigue threatened to overcome their resolve. The forest's ambient sounds became a symphony of exhausted breaths, soft whimpers, and determined footfalls. Yet, amidst the weariness, a sense of camaraderie blossomed. United by adversity, they pressed on, driven by the shared hope of safety and shelter. The once trickling streams had transformed into roaring rivers, their swift currents threatening to sweep away any who dared cross. Killian approached the water's edge, peering into the turbulent depths. He searched for shallower points or a series of stepping stones. He tied a rope around his waist, giving the other end to the strongest among the group, the deer fawn. Together, they would ensure no one was lost to the merciless flow of the waters. As they moved through the valley, the relentless rain intensified, turning the forest floor into a quagmire. The slopes above glistened with excess water, the earth looking saturated and unstable. Every footstep was made with caution, the risk of a landslide a real and present danger. Occasionally, small streams of mud and water would flow down, a warning of the catastrophe that lurked overhead. Killian knew they needed to escape this treacherous zone swiftly. The terrain started to change, with fewer trees and more open ground. It was evident they were nearing the heart of the coyotes' territory. Scratches on trees and remnants of meals left behind were chilling signs of the predator's presence. Each member of Killian's makeshift family was on high alert, their senses sharp and every movement calculated. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they treaded the domain of their adversaries. The group's progress was punctuated by ominous growls that echoed through the forest. At times, shadows flitted between the trees, just out of clear sight. The air grew colder, and an eerie silence descended, broken only by the distant sound of coyote calls. Killian tightened his grip on the makeshift staff he had crafted, acutely aware that their pursuers were drawing near, watching and waiting for a sign of weakness. Suddenly, emerging from the tree line, the familiar silhouette of the coyote pack appeared. Their eyes, filled with predatory intent, locked onto Killian and his companions. The forest held its breath as two forces, one defending and the other attacking, sized each other up. Killian stood tall and firm, positioning himself between the animals in his care and the pack. The face-off was palpable, a test of wills under the canopy of the forest. The coyotes, once merely shadows among the trees, were now up close, their fur bristling, teeth bared. Their collective growls grew louder, echoing menacingly through the forest. They began to circle Killian and his group, eyes glinting with anticipation, their pace deliberate and intimidating. The animals huddled close to Killian, their fear palpable. As the predators tightened their circle, a claustrophobic dread weighed down on the group. Killian, drawing from his ranger training, began enacting a series of defensive maneuvers. First, he used the staff to create a barrier, swinging it with precision to keep the coyotes at bay. Then he scattered some rations, hoping to momentarily distract them. Tying his bright jacket to the staff, he waved it around, trying to disorient the predators with sudden flashes of color. Each tactic bought mere moments, but moments were precious. The constant mental and physical strain began to wear down on Killian. His movements grew sluggish, breaths became labored, and his vision occasionally blurred. Every step, every decision was becoming a monumental effort. The animals, sensing his exhaustion, became more agitated. The fawn bleated anxiously, while the squirrels chattered nervously. In this dire situation, any misstep could prove fatal. Their retreat led them to the edge of a cliff, the ground abruptly ending behind them. Below, the roaring waters of a raging river crashed against jagged rocks. The realization hit hard. They were cornered. The coyotes, sensing the advantage, approached even more boldly, their confidence growing. With a steep drop behind and relentless predators in front, the options were dwindling rapidly. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, Killian planted his feet firmly and faced the advancing coyotes. He stood defiantly, brandishing his staff like a warrior of old. The animals rallied behind him, their collective will united against the threat. The squirrels climbed onto his shoulders, their tiny teeth bared, and the fawn adopted a protective stance. The forest bore witness to this moment as man and beast prepared for a final desperate stand. From the dense underbrush and towering canopies, other forest creatures began to emerge. A stout raccoon with a determined glare, birds with their feathers puffed out aggressively, even a skunk readying its potent defense. These animals, typically keeping their distance from each other, now joined Killian's side. An unspoken understanding arose among them. In this dire moment, their survival depended on unity against the encroaching coyotes. Together, the coalition of creatures enacted a multi-pronged strategy. The birds swooped down, pecking and distracting. The raccoon dashed back and forth, its agility drawing the attention of several coyotes. Most impactful was the skunk, who sprayed a noxious mist, causing a few coyotes to retreat momentarily, eyes watering. Killian and the squirrels capitalized on these distractions, hurling stones and sticks, forcing the predators to scatter and regroup. As the coyotes reeled from the combined defenses, Killian spotted a narrow pathway through a thicket, leading to higher ground. It was a route he remembered from his ranger training, one that would offer a strategic advantage. Signaling to the animals, he began making his way there, the path just wide enough for the fawn and him to pass, yet too narrow for the pursuing pack to navigate swiftly. Despite the series of diversions, the coyotes' determination did not waver. Their pursuit was relentless. While the narrow path slowed them momentarily, they soon found alternative routes, their howls ever present, reminding Killian and his allies of the imminent danger. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig underfoot kept the group on high alert, the haunting echoes of the predators growing louder with each passing minute. As they trekked on, the forest began to change. The trees grew older, their barks marked with familiar symbols Killian remembered. A particular cluster of stones, a creek he had crossed during happier times. These landmarks signaled they were nearing the ranger outpost, a haven against the wild. Spirits lifted among the group. If they could just reach it, safety and refuge awaited them. With every step, the familiar landmarks grew clearer, guiding them forward. Killian and his assembly of forest allies pressed on, using the terrain to their advantage. Narrow passes, steep inclines, and dense thickets became their aids, stymieing the coyotes' pursuit. The birds sent out calls, creating a confusing web of noise. Gradually, the haunting echoes of the predators began to fade, suggesting they were gaining precious ground. Breaking through a final curtain of trees, Killian's eyes caught the sight of Salvation, the ranger station. Perched atop a small hill, its wooden walls stood tall, a beacon of hope against the treacherous wilderness. The sun, low on the horizon, glinted off the station's windows, illuminating the outpost like a lighthouse. Killian felt a swell of relief. They were so close. Frantically, Killian reached into his pocket, fingers wrapping around a small metallic whistle. Bringing it to his lips, he blew a series of sharp, distinct notes, the universal distress call. The piercing sound echoed, cutting through the ambient noises of the forest. It was a call of desperation, a plea for assistance, resonating with hope that the rangers within the station would hear and recognize its urgency. Within moments of the whistle's cry, the ranger station sprung to life. Lights began to flash, doors swung open, and the hum of activity grew louder. Rangers, trained for emergencies like this, mobilized swiftly. Armed with tranquilizers and protective gear, they formed a perimeter ready to confront and deter any approaching threats. The safety of their own, a ranger in distress, was paramount, and they were poised for immediate action. As the rangers mobilized, a sudden brilliant streak of light split the dusky sky. Without warning, lightning struck a particularly dry patch of the forest. Almost instantaneously, hungry flames began to dance upwards, consuming all in their path. The fire's roars and the thick smoke billowing rapidly became a new, terrifying adversary. The coyotes, sensing this larger, more immediate threat, howled in fear and scattered in all directions, leaving Killian and the animals momentarily forgotten. The rangers, trained for all manner of emergencies, swiftly redirected their attention to the spreading fire. Killian, despite his fatigue, leapt into action alongside them. Together, they formed a rapid response team, employing fire breaks, water pumps and backfires to contain and combat the spreading blaze. The joint experience of Killian's forest knowledge and the rangers' training was crucial in their efforts to prevent the fire from becoming a catastrophic inferno. With the fire finally under control, the aftermath became starkly evident. Smoke-streaked faces of rangers met the anxious eyes of injured animals. Tents sprang up as makeshift veterinary clinics and animal experts rushed in, examining and tending to the burns, smoke inhalation, and injuries of the distressed wildlife. Killian, with squirrels on his shoulders, aided in comforting and helping transport the animals to safer locations. The forest, once teeming with life, now bore the scars of the fire's wrath. Determined faces of rangers, volunteers, and local communities could be seen in every direction, committed to the monumental task ahead. They cleared charred debris, planted fresh saplings to replace those lost, and set up feeding stations to help the displaced animals. The hum of activity echoed a singular commitment: restoring the forest's former glory. Weeks turned into months, and nature, with its indomitable spirit, began to heal. Fresh green shoots sprouted from blackened earth, animals slowly returned to their rehabilitated habitats, and the sounds of chirping and rustling once again filled the air. The forest, though scarred, displayed its resilience, reminding everyone of the regenerative power of nature when given a chance. Standing at the edge of the rejuvenating forest, Killian felt a profound connection to the wilderness around him. The journey, fraught with danger and challenges, had left an indelible mark on his soul. With the squirrels perched by his side, he made a solemn vow. He would dedicate his life to protecting and preserving this forest, ensuring that future generations could experience its unmatched beauty and vitality. As days turned brighter, the squirrels that had clung to Killian in their hour of need were now animated, their eyes gleaming with the spark of life. They chirped and nuzzled against Killian's cheek, their way of saying goodbye. With a final glance, they scampered up the trees, their tails flicking in contentment. Watching them blend into the foliage, Killian felt a sense of accomplishment and a pang of sweet sorrow. The forest fire and the subsequent restoration had been a stark educator. Killian realized that every being, from the tiniest insect to the majestic trees, played an essential role in maintaining the forest's delicate balance. The squirrels had been more than just companions. They had been teachers, showing him the intricate web of life. It was a revelation that nature was not just about beauty, but also about balance and interdependence. Emotionally enriched and with newfound wisdom, Killian felt an even deeper connection to the forest that had been his home and sanctuary. The recent events had solidified his sense of duty. With the dawn of each day, he became more resolute in his mission, to be a steward of the forest, to educate, and to ensure that its fragile ecosystem remained intact for generations to come. His relentless efforts, dedication, and the heartwarming tale of the squirrels soon spread among the ranger community and nearby villages. Tales of his bravery and commitment reached many ears, earning him respect and admiration. Soon, they began to affectionately call him the Guardian of the Forest, a title that wasn't merely given, but one that Killian had earned through sweat, blood, and unyielding love. With each passing day, Killian patrolled the rejuvenated forest with a keen eye and listening ear, ensuring its continued prosperity. His bond with the forest creatures deepened, their trust in him evident as they came closer, no longer viewing him as an intruder, but as a protector. As the sun set, casting golden hues over the trees, Killian knew that his bond with this forest was an eternal one, transcending time and challenges.